Hi, everybody. I'm Anjana Dayal Pruitt. I am based in Washington, D.C. area in the U.S. And I'm starting a new podcast for you all where I'm hoping to bring in lives that are different from a lot of other people. They've felt they've been othered because people have not fully understood them and who they are and what they stand for, or their mistakes were just exacerbated by the society and the structure of the society. And that also led to maybe even loss of opportunities in their lives. Um, Lives that we bring, including mine, are imperfect lives, lives that are full of challenges, where people have overcome some of those challenges, where also people are living through some of those challenges still and navigating through them. And really, the idea is to expand love and expand empathy for lives like ours who are not maybe conventional or regular or really fit well into the social structure. Um, and maybe also through this answer some of the questions that people have about lives like this, right? But to counter questions with questions usually can increase polarization, and that's not what we are trying to do here. We're really trying to bring people together for love and for empathy for each other. Today, my guest is Andy. Andy's a friend and a colleague. I met him only 2 years ago, and when he first told me his story, it was like a right, and somebody really sharing a story confidential in a confidential manner, and I was so inspired by his story, and I continue to be inspired by how he's growing in his life. And so I requested him if he would come as my very first guest for this series. So Andy, if you can join me here. And um, and so we know you are here in the United States, you live in Chicago, you work for a nonprofit. Um, but I'd love for you to tell me a little bit about your story from the perspective of the challenges and what makes it unconventional. If you could just give us a little bit of maybe just a bit of introduction about you, but also tell us about your story.
A little bit about myself. I grew up in West Texas, in the Texas Panhandle. As an early age, I was diagnosed with dyslexia, which is a learning disability, and it really impacts the way I read and see letters and numbers. So it it was quite difficult, and I struggled a lot in school. And because of this, I kind of learned at a quick early age to kind of give up. Um, and so it was kind of one of those challenges navigating school, um, really underestimating my capabilities. And I heard it once described was just a lot of noise. And that's what it felt like inside my head was just that constant on the defensive, um, projecting what I thought people wanted to see of me. So the first time I did drink, it was like it was a wave of calm. It quieted the noise, and it also, relaxed and gave me that confidence that I was able to, just speak and have conversation just comfortably. Um, so initially, when I went out drinking, of course, it was it was already starting of a numbing. I was starting to numb that anxiety and really treat that, and I didn't see that as self medicating, but that's exactly what I was doing. Um, how I ended up how I ended up here is just it's just been to really take advice and guidance. I've found my way into one stability, sobriety, and a professional career that I never thought I was going to
So
indefinitely.
So that's really right in the gist. If we go into details, so when you couldn't read properly, so you were probably having issues in the school, maybe your scores or your marks were going down. Um, and also having parents that were immigrants from Mexico, right? And we forgot to mention that in the beginning. I'm sorry. And so maybe more Spanish at home than what right in the school. So already you have right. Maybe your mother tongue is Spanish, and then you go to school, and then you're having issues also in reading. That must have really complicated it for you, and then something else started to happen before you got into alcohol, and DUI is just drinking under influence in the uh, regular term for those who didn't catch it when Andy was talking about it. Before you got to that phase, you started discovering something new about yourself, and what was that?
Yeah. So when I started to like look back in just that journey, and I mean, there's so many layers. Of course, being first generation in a very conservative area of the country, um, also just still in different various ways because I struggled to keep up academically, and also um, grappling with was my sexuality. So it was kind of one of those things that in the area that I was in, I didn't feel comfortable being open, and I'm also trying to figure out exactly um, how to navigate survival and um, adaptability. So I think on all fronts, whether it was in the school arena um, and a religious aspect, um, culturally with my family, I felt like I needed to shield and kind of project what I thought people wanted to see instead of being authentic, and that's been a beautiful journey. I can say that now, but at the time it was very mortifying. But yeah, it was it even after the even after embracing my sexuality, um, it didn't just which I thought would really kind of allow things to fall into place, but it really didn't.
Yeah. So for those people who don't know, people think in America everybody's part of the LGBTQ community, right? People are being forced and encouraged to be transgenders. And so there's that kind of thinking also goes around. I was just speaking to a friend in India, and she was like, I'm watching this video that in America, they're forcing children to be transgenders. So it gets a feeling, right? Like, so what's the big deal for Americans to be, right, part of the LGBTQ plus community? It's not right? Another country where some of these things have legal issues. So tell us firsthand what it is to be a Latino first generation immigrant, part of a very conservative Christian community in a very conservative state. What does that look like for a teenager to start discovering that I'm attracted to men? What does that mean?
I've always been in deep admiration for those that from day one they were just completely unapologetic for who they were. Unfortunately, that's something that I have grown into, and I continuously grow into that. But first, for me, I think that there was just again those layers, and so I think unknowingly I was already kind of just trying to cope, adapt. I wanted to immerse and not be different. My family was very, I think they were fearful of my safety. At the time, I thought it was more that they were ashamed of who I was. When I started to really come out as gay, I having a conversation at one point with my mother, and she was like, if you don't think that, if you think that you're gay and you want to continue this lifestyle, she wanted me to go to a bigger city. And I took it as kind of a form of rejection and being kind of exiled. But what I see today is that he they feared for my safety.
Mhm. So basically, what you're saying is that even though you are in America, there are areas and there are places in this country right here where a person, a gay person, a lesbian woman, a transgender person, genderqueer person can, there's life, their lives are at risk even here, even though there is no major law against it, but there are people that can go after this person's life, and either they can get killed. We also hear a lot of cases of suicide as well, from the LGBTQ plus community. So to think that in America everything is cool and everything is peachy, that's not the case. Still people are struggling. There are people who are out and who are, um, like you said, very bravely are out there and being who they are in so many different ways. So there are spaces and there are cities and there are areas that you can do that, but there are also places in this country where people are ashamed of, who you are as a person, or your life is at stake because of who you are as a, who you identify as. So thank you for helping all of us understand that, so it was great for you to then, in that scenario, to let even your parents know was a very hard scenario. And so then your initial coping, because we want to move into coping and your strategies to deal with all of this, but looks like, from what I remember, your initial coping actually led to your major problems as a result, which was taking some sort of refuge in alcohol. And that kind of led you to some also legal troubles. What happened?
At this point, the anxiety was so high that I fell deeply in love with alcohol. And so it really, just to really try to damper what was going on. At the age of 18, I got my first DWI. Um, and I was given probation for um, that first charge. Um, and then I didn't take it too seriously. I abstained as long as I could. That discomfort and the noise started to get too loud, and I impulsively wanted to make things exciting and distracting myself from what I thought my reality was. So I continued on that path. And then at the age of 19, I got my second EWI. And that's when I came out of the closet and tried to kind of help fix that, um, and think that was going to be the cure. I got probation for that second DWI, and I relocated to the city of San Antonio, Texas. And, and then at the age of 20, I got my third DWI. So all my, which led to that first felony conviction. There's for those who don't know that, I mean, those charges kind of escalate. And so now I was at a felony level, um, for that third conviction. And, that's where I, that's where I think that was, I knew I had a problem. I didn't, I was challenged. I still had some delusions that I could control it. Um, and so that was, yeah, that was the first felony conviction, and uh, I received a prison sentence of 4 years, and I served a year and 3 months and came out on, um, not probation but parole, and abstained for like a month, after being paroled and getting free again, and I went back to drinking. Um, and so I made it nearly 2 years before I got another, my fourth DWI, which leads to the second felony conviction. Um, and by that point, I thought Well, it was in a lot of trouble. My future was very much in uncertainty, and my life was on the line with sports, as it should have been. And so I think it was in that time I was in jail, and you know, had that realization that everybody else knew. I mean, I remember having a conversation with my sister on the phone in jail, and she said, "Andrew, I know that we're going to be successful in whatever it is to do, but that you have got to stop drinking." And I think it was the first time I'd been very honest, but it was also just honest with myself because I said, I don't think that I can. Um, and that was just the admission of being powerless and acknowledging that there was a problem. Up until that point, I don't think I could really say that. I think because I built up a shell of who I thought I should be, I didn't know who I was.
Mm.
So grappling with and who I thought I was at the time, I didn't like. I didn't like that person at all. So I was very uncomfortable again for various reasons. Whether I still was not fully okay with being gay, but just accepting that that's who I was. And thinking that there was still something wrong or something broken that needed to be fixed with me. Um, so I was still very uncomfortable. So those times that I tried to get sober on my own, and just be dry, not like abstain from alcohol, it simply didn't work. Um, because that noise starts to come back very loudly, and it you can only take so much discomfort before you kind of indulge again. And so there, I go with binging into my drinking. So in that moment, with in that conversation with my sister, I think that was the first. That was the first beginning that I can pinpoint that I was able to acknowledge that there's more than a problem. Yes, yes, I'm gay. Yes, now I'm an alcoholic. Um, the judge and the district attorney in the court system agreed to give me treatment, a rehab, um, and that was life changing. That was very life changing. That was the beginnings of a new foundation where I was starting to live authentically and honestly, with myself, with others, um, starting to starting that journey of actualization and realizing, who I was. I wasn't really still excited about the person that I thought I was, you know, and throughout life, I mean, I think people have always seen so much more in me. And it's always been a little uncomfortable, but I've learned to trust others, and then I'll come into that belief on my own for myself.
So, Andy, just to highlight a point, because it's a learning for me. So you're saying that I was gay and then I was now an alcoholic. You put those two identities on the same place in one sentence at one point. And then what you're saying is that you went to this rehab and then you really started living authentically, right? You were for the first time honest to yourself after your conversation with your sister Anna. And then you're here in this rehab, you're living a life that's authentic. And so what I'm hearing is that being gay was an authentic part of you were it was not something that you could take off like you were able to take off the right the alcoholism piece that you were able to drop. This was not something that was not part of who you were as an authentic, like it was part of your authentic identity is what I'm trying to say. Because also the other piece that a lot of people, those of us who are not part of the community, sometimes we feel, oh, it's something that people take on or because they've heard it they've watched too many news, or they have too many friends that are from the LGBTQ plus community, so they, you know, they like it, and so they're part of it. But what I'm understanding from you is, no, this was deep. This was part of who you were, and so that's why the pieces that were not part of your authentic self sort of dropped, but then pieces that were authentic Andy stayed with you, which was being a gay man, right? And so thank you for taking us to your right strategies of coping, and you know, you still continue to be right part of a conservative community, because back home people are conservative, and some of them may still be judging you one way or the other. But so you're saying you started trusting, you became very honest with yourself, you embraced your authentic self. So what helped you? What were the things that helped you go in this path?
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, yeah, there was no recruitment. I mean, I was surrounded in a very Christian community, in a area where it was not socially acceptable, and I didn't want that. I didn't think that I wanted that for my life. To I wanted to live the more conventional lifestyle of getting married to a woman, having kids, just, you know, I thought that's just, what I wanted. So at no point was I recruited. And if anything, I resisted and was very much ashamed of who I was. Um, you know, and also thinking that I was less than or broken. Um, I think what helped, you know, was also a conversation that I had with a religious figure who, um, helped me kind of just realize that, I'm there's nothing to fix with me because there's nothing wrong with me, and um, embracing that part of me, it it didn't make up my full identity. It was just a part uh, of of Andy, and so that foundation and that help just kind of came over time. And for me, it was moving to a more socially accepting part of the country. I moved to Austin, Texas after sobriety, um, and started to build and grow into that skin that I was comfortable in. Um, and I remember having a conversation with one of the counselors in rehab because I was starting to really get uncomfortable and nervous about leaving rehab because
Mm.
at least there I had safety, I had structure, um, I was at peace. And I remember her saying, "You're going to do fine. You're going to be great. Just be yourself." And that was such a mortifying statement because up until that point, I was like, "Self? I don't know who I am. And who I think I am, who I thought I was, I hated, I didn't like." Um, I, I was fortunate enough to be around a lot of people that made it a safe environment for me to really just bump around and figure out who being myself was. Um, and so that's been an ongoing process, but it's really kind of helped me kind of come into my own values and um, you know, which don't necessarily line up with what my family thinks, but it's been one of making sure that I stay healthy and right minded. That keeps me sober, um, and it's working for me. It has been with the resources of um, other sober folks, sober people, and mentorship, in various ways. But
And you yourself are a support, right? You yourself are an inspiration, and you mentor and support, and others as well. And I'm one of them who have really felt touched by your life, and the way you move on in life every time. And now you are an official in this big nonprofit. For how long have you not touched alcohol?
It'll be 14 years this
14 years.
September.
And I remember when we were both deployed together, it was my birthday, and we went to this
Yeah.
beautiful restaurant, and the other colleagues and I, we ordered alcohol, and you didn't even look at. And I was like, okay, so it's a lot of self-control, it's a lot of discipline, but like you said, also, so there are things that you're getting from others, but you yourself, who you are as a person is just, um, right? You're resilient and strong, and right, and um, walking inspiration. So you've left a lot of this stuff in the back. There's some issues, there are some pieces that some challenges that may still be around you, right? Like, is it, does it ever become perfect, is what I'm trying to say. And if it's not
Oh,
perfect, then how do you continue to navigate through life? What are some things that, right? Some challenges we can overcome and they go away. And then some pieces stay with us. How do you continue to navigate through challenges like that?
only thing that I've done perfectly is just abstaining from the alcohol. Um, but I think what was he was learning to have a lot of self love, be very gentle with myself, um, and compassionate. Um, and that's not always easy. I'm still can be very self punishing. And it's always comes back to the internal dialogue. But I think for me is just a lot of self reflection. I utilize various resources of counseling. I have my mentor in with alcohol, so I seek a lot of guidance. Um, part of part of my success has really been, you know, navigating through and really seeking a community that's goes far beyond my gay community and sober community. It's just my network of friends. Did I answer your question? I'm not sure if uh, maybe I went off in a different direction with that question.
It's perfect. You're going the right direction. And actually, we can also, right, come summarize this whole conversation with self-love and being gentle on ourselves. And it is when we are indulging in self-love, and it's something that my pastor also says. She said, Jesus said that love your neighbor as yourself. And she says, what Jesus is saying, that you need to love yourself first, and then you have to love the neighbor as you're loving yourself. But if you're hating yourself, how can you then love that neighbor as yourself? So the first act there is self-love and being gentle on ourselves, because we are the way we are, right? And how do we indulge in that gentle self-love for ourselves? Whether you see it from a religious perspective or you just see it from practical, healthy wellness perspective, I think that I'd love to end the conversation on that point, that if you, right, like if hearing you, if you weren't, like you said, I was ashamed of myself when I figured, right, that I was turning into a gay man, or I was a gay boy, or like you were ashamed of you didn't want that, and that led you to alcohol led you to legal issues and so many complexities, right? Trauma, that this anxiety that stayed with you, that you wanted to calm down, that voice that spoke to you all the time in your head, that you wanted to calm down through alcohol. And right in the beginning, if the society was instilling self-love and acceptation for you, maybe you probably would not have gone on that path. But sometimes we as a society, right, teach people to not love ourselves, question, judge, be hard on ourselves. And that leads us to sometimes into behaviors that may not be nurturing for us. And when we can nurture ourselves, then right, we can nurture others around us. So Andy, thank you so much, and thank you for that message of self-love and being authentic in our lives. So thank you, all the very best. I hope you will come back to this series and we'll continue the conversation. Any last?
Yeah. No, I mean, what I realized through this conversation is that how important connection is, and um, I think that's what it started with. I was just so much in isolation, so that once I started to allow to let people in and connect and healthy connections, you know, I think that's what allowed me to flourish.
Thank you. Thank you for those wise words. So self-love, being authentic, and connections. Okay, thank you. Take care.